streaming that?
Okay. No, it's not. Okay. So today we need to start thinking about how we're going to do the animation portion of our mobile app. Now we talked last time about how we're going to use the Google Maps API to grab our data from. Caleb did some research into that. Turns out we can in fact use it for free um, in kind of a weird roundabout way. So what I'll probably do, since you already one of the two of you, or maybe both of you, already have an API key, we'll probably just put that in Teams or something and just use the same key. Um, right. I mean, rather than like all of us having to like put a credit card, you know what I mean. I just feel like that would be unnecessary. I
I'm
don't.
hoping it doesn't change.
I'll put yours in. Give
The
me.
API key, no, it won't. Not like
I
I don't
already did once.
really.
Yeah.
Okay, see now that's concerning.
I
Well,
now have two.
Just give me your credit card.
I wonder if it invalidates the previous one. Like I wonder if it's a scenario where like that an existing key will still work. Do you know what I mean? Like so because it wouldn't make sense for it to change all the time because then like
No.
how you'd have to like manually update the website every day.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll deal with that when it comes. I have some experience with Twitter's API. I have no experience with and a little with YouTube. None with Google Maps really. So we'll kind of cross that bridge as we come to it. Today I've got a really short video I want to show you about CSS animations, and then we'll break off and we'll. I think you already saw this in WebDev 1, but it's not going to hurt to refresh. This is all the different things we can do with CSS animations. As Connor mentioned last time, probably the best way to do this is to have
No CSS.
a to have like a basically use blur to simulate the spinning of the wheel, and then just sort of have it select one and like land on that one. I mean, we can work with that, right? So that's what we'll focus on today, is just trying to get those animations to look proper, to look correct. On Tuesday, we'll talk a little more about the Google Maps API. I'm gonna do some research over the weekend, hopefully, and we'll talk about how to implement the lock mechanism, so that like if you have a specific kind of food that you want, you can lock it into place, and say that you want to keep it that way. If there's anything else, I think that'll be all for Tuesday. Anyway, let's check this video out, and then we won't have a break today just because the lecture's not very long, and so you can just break as you need to throughout the lab time. So let's switch over here and check out this video on CSS animations in 15 minutes.
Overwhelmed by CSS animations? If so, this is the perfect video for you because I'm going to break down everything there is to know about CSS animations. And also, if you're feeling stuck with CSS selectors or confused about all the selectors that are out there, make sure to check out my full CSS selector cheat sheet down in the description below that's going to give you all the information you need to know about selectors. Let's get started now. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name is Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Now to get started, I have just some really basic HTML and CSS. I have a parent and a child div, and as you can see, the parent is outside the child, so the child is inside the div, and this parent has this dark blue color, as you can see on the right, and this child has the red color. And then whenever you hover over the parent, all I'm doing is transforming the child, so essentially I'm moving it all the way to the right side of the parent and back again, depending on if it's hovered or not. And we want to talk about animations, because right now this is really jerky. There's no smooth animation between these different states. And in CSS, there's two different ways to animate. You can use the transition property, which is simple and works great for doing simple animations. And then there's the full-on animation property, which is a bit more complex, but is great for making more complex multi-step animations. In this case, we're going to get started with transition and then move on to animation, because this can be done by just a simple transition. So how do you go about writing a transition? Well, all you need to use is the transition property in CSS. And the first mistake most people make is they put the transition on the hover, or the place where the transition is happening. But in our case, when we're hovering over the parent, the transition will be applied, but as soon as we unhover the parent, the transition will be removed. So where you need to actually put it is on the child itself. And I'll show you why once we get the transition written. So in order to write a transition, you can just write out the word transition. And as you can see, there's multiple transition properties. There's timing function, property, duration, delay, and then just the transition keyword itself. This is just like with margin, how you have margin left, right, top, bottom, and then the margin keyword that has all of them combined into one. Transition just combines all 4 of these properties into one, and it's generally how you're going to write transitions. So by default, a transition is going to transition all of the properties on your element. It'll have all written here, but we really only want to transform or transition our transform here. So we're just going to write transform. What this does is tells our CSS we're only wanting to animate this one single property and nothing else. So if our color changed, for example, it wouldn't actually be animated. And then what we need to do is specify how long this animation will take. You can say 100 milliseconds, for example. In our case, we're going to say 1 second. And this is all you really need for a transition. If we save this and hover, you'll notice our box moves to the right over 1 second. We unhover and it moves to the left over 1 second. And if we get rid of transform here, you'll see that it still works because it just defaults to animating all of our properties. So if we were to, for example, change our background color here, color to green, you'll now see it transitions slowly from red to green as it goes across the board. But inside of here, if we just wrote transform, you'll notice that now our color transformation is instantaneous while the actual transform itself is being transitioned back and forth over 1 second. So this is great for specifying individual things that you want to transition and other things that you don't. So now I want to show you why the transition isn't put on the hover version. So if we come over here and put transition on the hover, just like this, and I save, when I hover over this object, you're going to notice it transitions really smoothly. And that's because I'm currently hovered, so I have a transition being applied. When I unhover, you'll notice it instantly moves the element back. And that's because this transition property is no longer set on the child because this hover state doesn't exist. It's as if this was not here. So there's no transition being applied to the child itself, so it doesn't do that smooth animation. This is why when you specify transitions, you always want it to be on the base class, in our case this .child, and not the actual modified class of hover in our case. Now the last 2 things that we can do with this transition property are specify a delay as well as a timing function. A timing function is essentially determining how your different animation is going to play out. For example, we could put linear as our timing function, and this means that there's going to be even spacing between the beginning and end of our animation. Each of the frames of our animation takes the same amount of time, so our object moves linearly from one side to the other. If we did, for example, ease in, out, what this is saying is start out slow and end slow, and in the middle be slightly faster. So if I save this and hover, you're going to notice the animation starts out slow, speeds up in the middle, and then slows down at the end. And the same thing on the way back. And if you want to really take this and customize it even further than just using these few preset values, what you can do is we can just inspect our element here. We have our child. And if you come down here where it says transition, you'll notice it has this little squiggly line next to your ease in out. Click on this and it'll open up an editor for you where you can actually edit the exact curve. And this is the path that your element is taking. So here, this is ease in out. This right here is another type, and we can kind of cycle through a bunch of different preset ones. Or what we can do is drag around these handles and create our own. So for example, if we wanted the thing to bounce, we could drag this here so it goes past the top and it's going to bounce back. And if you see this ball up here, this is essentially what our animation is going to look like. So if we do this, it's going to start out slow, speed up, bounce over top, and then come back. We'll just copy this cubic Bezier down here. You almost never write these by hand. These editors built into the browser are perfect. So we copy this and just replace this keyword ease in out with that cubic Bezier. Now when we save and we hover here, you're going to notice it starts out really slow and then it jumps past our ending value. As you can see, it jumps past the end and then comes back to the final resting position. This is how we can write these custom cubic Bezier curves in order to further take our animation to the next step with these really cool timing functions. And then the last thing we can do with these transforms is specify a delay. So let's just say we wanted to delay for 3 seconds. Now when I hover over this, it's going to take 3 seconds before the animation actually occurs, and then it's going to move. Same thing when I release it, it's going to take 3 seconds, and then it's going to start the actual animation itself. Now unfortunately, that's pretty much all that we can do with transition. We can't get any more complex. For example, if I wanted to take this cube and move it from the top left to the bottom right to the top right in kind of a circular motion, I couldn't do that with transition because it requires multiple different steps, which is where animations come in. So what I'm going to do is show you how to take this current transition. We're just going to simplify this a little bit. We're going to change this to ease in, for example, just so we have a little bit of a simpler transition. I'm going to show you how to take this transition and convert it over to the animation syntax, and then how we can take that a step further and make this circle around our cube here. So to convert a transition to an animation, all we need to do is write out the word animation. And with animations, you write it in the place where you want it to happen, in our case, here on our hover. So we write out animation. As you can see, animation has a bunch more properties than the transition does. You can see it has all of these different properties, and then the animation keyword, which combines all of them together. And generally, you'll just write everything in the animation keyword because it's much easier. And the first thing an animation needs is a name. This can be anything that you want. It's just a custom name so you know what this animation is. We're going to call this left to right because that's what it does. It moves from the left to the right. Then just like with our transition, we can specify our duration, in our case 1 second. We can specify a timing function, in our case ease in. We could even specify a delay if we wanted that 3-second delay, but we're just going to leave that off for now. So this right here is all of the code for our animation complete. But how do we actually write out our animation? We gave it a name, but where do we define that name? Well, that is where keyframes come in. So if we just come down here, type in @ and then keyframes, this is just like if you did a media query, you put the @ symbol and then the word keyframes, and this has to be outside of any selector. It's on its own. Then we put the name, in our case, left to right. Again, this can be anything you want. It just has to match your animation's name. This is how they get linked together. Then we put a set of curly braces, and in here is where we define our keyframes. And keyframes essentially determine what our animation looks like at all of the values between 0% and 100% complete. So in our animation, at 100%, we want to have this transformation. We could say 100%, and we can just copy in here our transform translate x to 100%. This is what our animation looks like at 100%. And by default, if you don't specify anything, for example 0%, it'll just default to whatever the values here are for our child itself. So right now, if we save this, we should get the exact same animation. If I hover, you'll notice it moves over to the right, but you'll notice something weird. As soon as it gets to the right-hand side, immediately the animation jumps back to the very beginning. Let's try that again. We hover, it gets to the right, and then immediately it defaults back to where it was at the beginning. The reason for that is that animations, what happens is they do everything inside of their keyframes. In our case, all we have is 100% because our 0% is this default up here. And it's saying, okay, do all of this animation, and as soon as the animation's done, it removes all of the properties it added. So it goes back to whatever the default is here inside of child, which in our case, our translate is not applied, which is why it's in the default position. If we wanted to, for example, keep this transform and keep this extra translate, what we need to do is tell our animation that. So what we can do inside of animation is we want to say that this animation is forwards. This property is called the animation fill mode. This can either be the backwards, both, or forwards. And really all this is saying, if you specify backwards, it says before my animation starts, apply all the properties at the 0% keyframe, which we don't even have. If we specify forwards, it says after my animation is done, keep all of the properties inside of the 100% keyframe. And finally, if you use both, it'll essentially combine backwards and forwards together. So now if we save this and hover, it's going to move to the right and it's going to stay there because this forwards keyword is saying I want to keep all the properties in the 100% keyframe, so it's keeping this transform here. Another really important thing about CSS animations that most people don't think about is performance, and it's actually really easy to make poorly performing CSS animations. So I made an entire video about CSS animation performance, which I'll link in the cards and description down below. So now I want to take this a step further. As I said, I want to move it around here in a circle from top left, bottom right, top right. So how would we go about doing that? Well, let's just come in here. We're going to write out different keyframes. We're even going to define our 0% keyframe, even though we really don't have to. And we're going to say transform translate x, and we want this to be 0. This is going to be our default value. And at 100%, we want this to be in that top right corner. So this is already correct. Now we need to define our intermediary keyframes. So we're going to have 33% and we're going to have 66%. So at 33%, all we're going to do is take our transform. We're going to translate the y direction 100%. This should translate as down 100%. And let's just save this and see if this works. If we hover, you'll notice it moved us down that 100%, which is what we expected. Then at 66%, we need to essentially have our transform contain both our translate x of 100% and our translate y of 100%. That should correspond with the bottom right hand corner. And now if I save that, we should get this box moving in a circle. So if I hover, you can see it moves all the way around our square from top left all the way to the top right in order from top left, bottom right, and top right. And if I remove, and go back, you can see that it is doing that full loop again, which is exactly what we want. So right now we've pretty much only taken what we can do with a transition and then slightly improve upon it by adding additional keyframes inside of here. But we can actually do so much more with animation. And let's just remove this transition up here. This hasn't been doing anything, but just to be super clear that we're working with just our animation. There we go, it's working as expected. So with animation, we can go a step further than just doing a complex animation. We can also tell our animation how many times to repeat, the order we want to run the animation, and so many other things. So for example, we have something called an animation iteration count. We can say how long we want the animation to be, repeating. So we could say 3, for example. This is going to cause our animation to occur 3 different times. So if I hover, you can see it moved around, around, and around. And right now, it's doing this little jarring thing where it jumps back to the beginning, repeats the animation, jumps back, repeats the animation. If instead of doing that jumping motion, we wanted to make it go around, and then back, and then around, we could specify the direction of our animation. And there's a direction called alternate, which essentially just says when I get to the end of the animation, for the next iteration, go backwards. So if I hover this, you can see that it's moving back and forth, and it does that 3 total times. 1 time forward, the second time goes backwards, and the third time goes forward. We could also specify a delay here, and as long as we put it after our duration, doesn't matter, we could just come in here and say, we'll do 3 seconds. So when I hover, there's going to be a 3-second delay, and then our animation is going to occur, as you can see, and it does it 3 different times, and then it stops. So we can combine a bunch of different stuff with animations, but we can take this a step further. Let's say that we want this animation to occur infinite times with no delay, and instead of doing this on hover, we actually want this animation to be permanent. So we'll just put it up here, and now when I save, you'll notice that this just does the animation over and over and over again, and since we're doing it infinite times, it's never going to stop. But we can actually make this animation play and pause based on something called the animation play state, I believe it's called. Animation play state. And this determines whether the animation is running or paused. We can set it to be paused whenever the hover state is active. So now, when the animation is running and I hover, it'll immediately pause the animation. Unhover, and it'll continue, and hover, and it stops. And it'll stop wherever in the animation I am whenever I hover, because I'm setting this play state here to paused. Running is just the opposite of paused. It's essentially the default. That means the animation is currently occurring. The final thing that I want to mention, if we just change this back to paused, is that inside of these keyframes, you can do whatever you want. For example, I could change the background color, start it out at red, and then jump all the way down to 100% and say the background color is green. And now if I save, you'll notice throughout the animation, it's changing from red to green. And even though I didn't supply a background color in this intermediary state, it's just saying from 0% start at red and then slowly animate all the way to green at 100%. And if I threw something in the middle here, for example, 50%, I could say background color of blue. Now what's going to happen is it's going to animate from red to blue. The blue will be right in the dead middle here. If I hover, you can see it's blue right in the very center. It'll go to green, back to blue and red, and it'll do that over and over and over again. You can do a lot of really cool things with these keyframes. Essentially what happens is it just does a transition between each one of these keyframes. That's really all that's occurring. And that's all there is to animations in CSS. If you enjoyed this video, then you're going to love my free CSS select.
Are we though? Okay, so there's that. Now Connor mentioned SVG, so like vector graphic animation. We went over that in WebDev 1. Probably honestly wouldn't hurt to go over it here again real quick. Give me just a second to get that pulled up, and we can do that. So let's see, SVG animation, CSS. All right. So as I always do before I play this guy's videos, this guy's super smart. I really like him. I think his videos are very useful. I think his personality is kind of weird, and I think like sometimes he makes like weird sounds and stuff. Like he'll just be like bleh, bleh, like while he's like doing stuff, which I find very odd, but that doesn't detract from how valuable the information is. So let's transition over here and an SVG animation with CSS. Now pay close attention in this because if you may recall from WebDev 1, there were a lot of questions after this video where people were like skipping like really important, like there's one part where it says, you know, like export your, click this button to like, you know, export your SVG to like, it'll give you the data that you need. People would skip that step and then be like, well, I don't understand why I can't access like this different thing or whatever. So make sure that you're paying attention to this. And I'll throw this up on Canvas along with the video we just watched here in just a minute.
Hey there, my gorgeous friends on the internet. Yes, I shaved. I look 12, so that's exciting. Exciting times here on the DevEd channel. Anyway, what I want to cover today is some SVG animations because a lot of people are interested in those and a lot of people don't really know how they work. So I want to give you a quick little tip and trick on how you can achieve them. Now I'm going to cover this also in my course so you can get more practice there, but let me kind of give you a quick look on how we can do this. I have a mosquito here in my room. Go away. I'm gonna burn you. Well, that has nothing to do with the tutorial, so let's get going. First thing we need to do is actually get an SVG. So, oh no, this is the finished product. No, let's close this up. So what we want to do for once, we can just go to undraw, okay? Because this is super easy, super simple, and you can use these for free. All right, so let's kind of pick one of these out. But you can also make your own SVGs, or you can find them in other places. But for now, let's create that bike, and I used undraw for this. So the first step is to find the bike, and the way you can do that is just go to search. I'm gonna say bike, hit enter, and this is the guy here. So I'm gonna hit download, and after I hit download, I have the bicycle down here. Okay, open with Internet Explorer, lovely. All right, let's close this up. No, why you do this? Why you do this? I deleted the thing, are you kidding me? Let's download again. Okay, and what we would do is, I highly recommend you to use this with Figma because it's very easy to export things. It's free, you can export things the way you want. And also, it's very easy to do slight edits to it. So what I want to do, see, this is the finished one, so let's make a new one. So I'm gonna hit the plus symbol up here. Plus! Ah! Okay, I'm sorry. Let's calm down. And what I want to do is, we can just drop in the SVG. So let me go here, drag it, drop it, bum, 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 amazing. Okay, so what I want to do is open this up here, and as you can see, we have a ton of these small little files. So what you want to do is kind of group up everything the way you want to animate and kind of get rid of the things that you don't want. So this plant I do not want. So what I will do is just kind of scroll down here all the way till I kind of get to the plant thing. So it's around here, all right? So this thing, I can toggle it on and off. The upper part here, this is the plant as well. So kind of from here, let me scroll down. As you can see, it kind of highlights the thing there as I scroll down all the way. Okay, so till almost the last one. I'm gonna select everything here and just get rid of it. Another way you can select it is you can just double click on it like this, or click once. If it doesn't select it, you can just click once. And you can kind of manually get rid of it like this. Okay, nice. Okay, so I don't want that. Now we are also gonna find that this kind of has a lot of shadows in. So there's one. So you kind of want to simplify your shapes as much as possible. Now, to be honest, let's keep all of these. So what I want to do is, again, just kind of group everything the way I want to animate. So if I want to animate this hat, I want to group this in its own thing. So as you can see, I can select the hat like this. And there's also that shadow below it, so I'm gonna select that as well. So this weird shadow. Okay, so let's go back here. Actually, you know what? If I drag this, let's get rid of this whole big shadow thing. Click delete. All right, I'm gonna move this hat back. Something like that. Okay, so we have the hat. Let's grab the hat. I'm just gonna hit Control G. That's gonna group it up, and I'm gonna name this hat, all lowercase, hat. Okay, next up, what I want to do is kind of mess around with this background color. So I'm going to select this. Let's go to linear here. I'm just going to create kind of a nicer looking color. So drag this kind of in this direction. And I want to increase the opacity of this. And as you can see, you cannot see it that well. And the reason why is because this has a pass-through of 10. So I'm going to just raise this up to 100. Okay, and let's kind of mess around and get the interesting color. So kind of like an aqua looking thing like that. And here, let's kind of go with I don't know, something like that. That looks kind of cool. Okay, I'm happy with that. Next up, what I want to do is also kind of change these colors here. So I'm gonna click here and select each one of them and maybe do like a darker gray. something like that. Somebody honked. Hello. Okay. So now I can just select each one of these and hit I, and then just kind of change the color of it. Okay, there we go. We are painting today. Whoops. All right, so this doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Oh, because there's this stupid shadow underneath. So let's get rid of that. I and I. And actually, again, another shadow here. So let me get rid of that. Actually, let's do the darker part here. Let's do the wheel color. Like that. Okay, perfect. So I got everything the way I want it to look. So now it's grouping time. So we have the hat. I'm gonna bring this, actually drag it all the way up here. Okay, next I wanna group basically, what else do I wanna animate? Well, I wanna animate the wheels. I'm gonna grab this part. Let's see, we have these. I'm gonna hold shift, grab this and the wheel. Let's see, okay, we grabbed the whole thing. There's that little dot, but screw the dot. So I'm gonna hit Control G on all of these selected. So I kind of move it around first to see what I have grabbed. Control G. All right, as you can see, it groups it here. So I'm gonna rename this to right wheel, like that. And then we'll do a T to the other one as well. Grab this, hold shift, grab all of these, Control G, group. This is gonna be left wheel. Okay, perfect. So I can actually turn these off for now, so I can see kind of what else is left here. So all of this section, I'm actually gonna grab everything. Let's also grab the background and turn it off. And I'm just gonna grab everything here like this and kind of group everything together as well. I don't know what this is. Let's get rid of this. Group everything together and name this man on a bike or man bike. Okay, and that's it. That's all we need to do. So now we can turn everything back on, even the background, and now we can export this. So I'm gonna click on the parent element here and I'm gonna hit export. Now this is very important, so pay attention. Pay attention. We're gonna switch to SVG, okay? And then we're gonna hit these 3 dots. And it's very important for you to click here. Include ID attribute. So this way, when we export everything, these are gonna have an ID. So the hat is gonna have an ID of hat, the bike is gonna have an ID of man bike, and the right wheel is gonna have the ID of right wheel. So now we can just export this whole thing and we can straight up jump in and animate it in CSS. Amazing. Figma, oh my god, they're almost better than Ligma. Okay, so let's go on this, make sure we have those selected, export, and we're gonna bring it, I already made a file here, let's create another one. Bike boy, like this. All right, and we're gonna save it there. So let's open. I'm gonna rename this bike guy. All right, that's the file name. Save, and we are done. We can open up our favorite photo editing tool via Visual Studio Code. All right, and let me open up that folder. So the bike boy. Okay, so here let's just kind of throw together our index.html and our CSS. Like that, let's generate a file by holding Shift and 1, tab, and that's gonna generate this. Let's rename this to bike. And in here, what I wanna do is copy everything over. Yeah, I know, it's gonna be crazy. And the reason why we wanna copy everything over is so we can animate these individual paths, okay? So this is gonna make your HTML look ugly, but hey, I mean, you cannot get everything nice in life. So let's go up here. Let's also create a style.css like this. And what I want to do is just kind of add let's remove the basic stylings, margin 0, padding 0, and box sizing, border box, and hit save. Okay, let's open this thing up. So we're gonna hit go live. There we go. So this is what we have. Okay, we can grab, let's just add the body and kind of move this in the center, just body, text align center. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, never mind. Let's drop it inside a div. Okay, there we go. Drop it down here. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. All right, there we go. Close this up. Let's move back up here. Oh, we didn't have the style sheet linked. That's why it didn't work. Okay, cool. Style sheet. Wow, now it's aligned in the middle. Amazing. Okay, so that was useless. Anyway, let's move on to the next part where we are gonna create these keyframes. So now all I need to do is literally just grab whatever I want to grab. So let's see, I want to do the right wheel. And I can straight up just CSS animate this because Figma did it for us. So I just grab the element here, and down here I just create a keyframes, and I'm gonna name this wheel. And what I want to do is say from and to. So what do I want to animate? I want to rotate it like this, boom, boom, boom. Okay. So what I want to do is say transform, rotate, and we're gonna rotate the Z angle. And I'm gonna do 360 degrees, okay? Actually, we are moving from 0 to 360. So let me copy this here and change this one to 0. Okay, and here what we can do is say animation, we can say wheel, we can do 1 second ease, and see how that looks. Oh no, well that's not what we want. It kind of spins around like that. So if you have this issue, there's a super simple way you can fix it. What you can do is you want to make sure that the position that it rotates is actually in the center here. So the rotation position. So what you can do is you can say, I forgot, no. Origin, something with origin, transform origin. So we can get this transform origin and we can say center. Hit save. Now it's better, but it still kind of rotates around this SVG thing, right? So even though it rotates from the center up there, it kind of still takes up the space of this whole big thing. So to fix that issue, you can actually add something called transform box. So let's go to transform box like this. As you can see, it says the transform box defines the layout box to which transform and transform origin properties relate to. So we can do transform box, and what we can do is say fill box, and this is gonna fix everything up nicely. So let's take a look, refresh, and it's spinning. Awesome. So what I want to do is actually change this from, just add infinite here. I want this to go forever. So as you can see, it goes forever. But the problem is it kind of slows down a bit, and then it starts again. So what we need to do is change the easing. We want to switch that to linear, so it keeps a constant speed throughout the whole animation. So if we change it to linear, oh no, it's not working. Why is it not working? And it doesn't work because I added ease here. So let's get rid of that. Hey, it's spinning the way we want. Perfect, lovely. We can slow it down a bit, maybe 2 seconds is fine. Okay, so something like that. Now we can do the same thing to the other wheel. So I can just add a comma here and I can say left wheel. Hit save. That's gonna give me the same result. Okay, so let's kind of do some animation with the guy that we have here. So what we can do is take a look. What name did we pick? We can actually get rid of this SVG, but it's a bit nicely organized here. So we can get this man bike. Okay, so let's target the man bike like that. And this guy is gonna get another keyframe. So let's say keyframes. I'm gonna say bike to this. And let's do, what we can do is say transform, let's from and to. I kind of want to make it like he's bending over a bit, like going down, like he's riding the bike. So what I found looking good was something called transform, and we can do rotate X. I'm gonna do 0 degrees here, and down here I'm gonna do transform rotate X 20 degrees. All right, let's take a look how that looks. So we can go back here to Mr. Man Bike, and we can add a animation. We can do bike. Let's do 1 second, ease in and out. Let's do infinite, and let's take a look how that looks. All right, that looks weird, and it kind of jumps back to its original position. So what I want to do is add alternate, and that's gonna fix that. It's gonna alternate between those both motions. But here's what I don't like. You see right there, this kind of lifts above the wheels and it's kind of floating. So again, I can change that transform origin and I can add it to the bottom if I want. So this position always stays there, and it animates from this position. So only the top part is gonna change. So if I add a transform origin, no. Transform origin, and I'll change this to bottom, hit save. There we go. That's much, much better. It's not perfect, but it's way better. Okay, so that's step one. Let's also animate the hat. This is optional, but you can do it. And what I did here was I just did another keyframes. Keyframes. Let's say hat and from. Let's do 2. All I did was add a transform. Translate Y, I believe. It was like 20%. Actually 0 to 20% or something like that. Let's do 30 and 0 here. Save, and let's also add it to the hat. So let's go up here and say hat. This is gonna have an animation of 1 second. It's called hat, 1 second, ease in and out. It's gonna be infinite and alternate. Save. Okay, that's not good. Something fell on the ground, I apologize. So let's kind of mess around with the transform origin and the fill box. Let's kind of copy over these two, transform origin and transform box, and paste them here. Okay, much better. There we go. So now it kind of moves with the head. So that looks quite okay. And you can kind of mess around with this. Let's try top, transform origin top. Okay, let's go back to center. Maybe change the speed of this. Let's do 40. So it kind of moves on his head. Yeah, so it kind of bumps a bit up and down. Independent from that. You can also do a spinning if you want. Rotate Z, 0 degrees. And then maybe we can do a rotate C of 20 degrees. Is that crazy? All right, kind of like lifts up like that. All right, so kind of experiment with this, see what you can come up with. But as you can see how easy it is to make these CSS animations with SVGs. All right, so Figma makes it real nice with you, and it's free. So have fun with it, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, so that's gonna be it. Hope you enjoyed it.
Okay, so let's talk here for just a minute about a couple of things related to that. So let's think for a second what a slot machine wheel looks like. Okay, so a slot machine wheel is similar to the wheel on Price is Right, like the big wheel that they spin, right? It is segmented off into even sections that have varying things on them. Now, a real slot machine is going to have potentially multiple of the same thing, right? Depending on what the odds of the machine are and things like that. So, you know, it might have 2 lemons on each one, or 2 cherries on each one, or something like that. So your odds of getting a cherry, actually, if lemons are bad, it would actually probably have more lemons than anything else. But my point is that it's got a collection of various images, and they spin around like this, right? Now, we can add some blur, right, to our animations. We can also add a little bit of stretching. So maybe as they descend from the top, they stretch just a teeny bit to look as though they are curving. Otherwise, they're going to look flat. So we should distort them a little bit. Totally, they're mostly unrelated. Little sidebar here. There's a book called The Illusion of Life that was written by some Disney animators back in the 80s. If you get a chance to pick up a copy of that book and read it, I highly recommend it. It talks about like anticipation and like squash and stretch and things like that. That if you want to at some point get into 3D animation, 2D animation, CSS animation, it's all good stuff to know. But anyway, you'll stretch it a little too at the bottom, right, so that it distorts going this way to look as though it's being pulled around the corner, right? So there's that. Now, that being said, we don't have to go with a slot machine style wheel. I mean, we kind of decided last time that it might be the best way to go, but I don't think that we should just approach it from that being set in stone, right? If as we're working along, we're like, you know, it just isn't looking right. I think it'd be easier, just look better if it were Wheel of Fortune style wheels that were, you know, face the other direction. That's fine. If you want to go that route, that's also totally fine. Some of those same principles will still apply, adding blur and things like that to enhance the illusion of the animation. But anyway, so what we're going to need to do then is you're going to need to get together as a big group like you do, and you're going to need to assign tasks and so that the following gets done. We have at least one wheel that we can do 2 things with. Animate it, but also scroll up and down with it. Okay, so I need to be able to manually move the wheel up and down as well. Okay, that's thing number 1. Thing number 2 that we need to be working on for next Tuesday is being able to lock a selection into place once we've manually moved the wheel. We should be able to click a lock and say, like, I want it to only cost $1 sign, or I want it to be pizza, or whatever it is. And we also need to be able to know which one we landed on, right? So like if it lands on chicken, for example, like to use his example from the Wheel of Fortune thing, if it lands on the chicken, maybe it plays a chicken sound, right? That's a turkey, but whatever, I don't know whatever sound chicken makes, I don't know. But anyway, so those are the 3 things we need to be working on. So let's make sure that for the next hour and a half or so, we're doing that. I don't see why there's any reason why you couldn't have all 3 of those things done. At least 2 of them. The selecting something based on where the wheel lands is a little more challenging. But the first 2 things, I see no reason why you couldn't have those both wrapped up today. Okay. All right. So go ahead and break off into your group and start working on that. I'll be walking around and